Coming up next. Stay tuned to learn more about the state of blockchain education at major universities all around the world. Reimagine 2020.
Hello there, my name is John deVadoss. I lead development for NEO with a focus on tools and the developer experience based in Seattle, Washington. It is my privilege and certainly my pleasure to be here for Reimagine 2020.
Hey everyone, it's Patrick McLain again, one of your guests for Reimagine 2020. I'm excited to bring a new guest to you. It's John deVadoss. Did I butcher it?
No, it's good. That's good. Look, the way I say it is, it doesn't mean anything in English anyway, so it doesn't matter how you say it.
So, guys, first off, I had the last week I was able to listen to some of the stuff John had talked about, read a little bit, and definitely excited to have him on as a guest. And even in the few minutes before this call, I think a very positive energy. I'm big on first impressions, so I'm excited for you guys to get to know him. And I'll stop butchering it. But John, for the audience, why don't you introduce yourself a bit, maybe a bit about your background and maybe the journey that kind of led you to blockchain and why you're excited to be a part of it.
Oh, absolutely. Again, thanks again for making time for me. Yeah. So look, I'm from India originally, grew up in East Africa, Tanzania, went to school in India and the US. I have a bachelor's, master's in computer science, did PhD work in machine learning long before machine learning was cool and sexy. Spent about 19, 20 years at Microsoft working on platforms. I led architecture for the .NET platform v1 and v2. Spent many years shipping tooling, frameworks, and libraries for millions of developers worldwide. Worked on 2 machine learning startups that we exited. I first encountered crypto about 10 years ago. At that time, I was mostly dabbling, obviously, in the coins, but during my startup adventures is when I went deep down the rabbit hole, as they say. I realized the potential of the platform and the opportunity that we had to serve millions of developers worldwide. And that's what led me to NEO and to work on building the best possible tooling and experience for developers on the NEO blockchain.
Got it. So you and I were chatting before. Obviously, you grew up in Tanzania. I was just there for a little bit, but it's always one of the examples I've used, since I had a short time there, and say, man, if 10 years ago I was there, 12 years ago, and say they were using M-Pesa, they're sending money from Nokia T9 phones, right, back and forth. So while some of us in the world might think we're novel to have Venmo, right, or make these transactions, or we might think that certain countries aren't as technically advanced as us. And the flip side, I would argue, what were the experiences that growing up there, or that you've seen, or that you're aware of, that kind of influence how you think about blockchain?
Oh, absolutely. Look, I mean, I had a fantastic time, about 8 years growing up in Tanzania, all over the place. Arusha, like you said, Dar es Salaam, Tabora, Mbeya, Bukoba, all over. So a few things I learned. Firstly, I would say, necessity is the mother of invention. And I think M-Pesa, as you said, very clearly grew from the need to find a way to transact, to exchange. And being able to use, cell phones and texting was a very powerful way to fulfill a need in the marketplace. The second thing I would say is, in terms of the opportunity to serve millions of people worldwide, there is still a huge opportunity for the man in the street, the common man, the common woman, to contribute and to benefit from what they have to offer. The world as we see it is still lopsided. And I see the potential of the blockchain platforms to do our small bit to make this a much more fair, much more equitable, and provide opportunities for people to benefit from their energy, from their potential, and from their contributions, and certainly growing up in Africa and in India, gives me a certain perspective that I hope to bring to bear in both the tools and the apps that we build.
Got it. So when we touch on that subject of experience, obviously you've had a pretty seasoned background in technology. How did that influence, what were those past experiences? And I guess maybe I'll zoom out for 1 second and say, I'm always intrigued, we have a development team and I've always looked at, why aren't there more blockchain developers? What are the difference between a regular developer and a blockchain developer? What experiences in your past kind of led you to blockchain? How do they influence how you think about it now? And from a technology standpoint?
A fantastic question. So first of all, I would say there are no blockchain developers. The same way there are no, I would say, iPhone or app or front end or back end or cloud. There are developers, period. The mistake I think much of the blockchain industry made early on was in trying to pigeonhole and silo the so-called blockchain developers with special purpose languages, like what the Ethereum guys did with Solidity, with what I call elite developer tools, in many ways put up barriers. You almost had to have these high priests of blockchain development to come in, to write the code, to write the contract, to review and to bless it before they were deployed. This is fundamentally flawed. Let me explain. Across the world, there are about 21 million developers. And there is no way we in the blockchain space can deem ourselves to be successful if we focus only on the 10,000 or the 50,000 or even the 100,000 people who are building smart contracts. We have to go to where the developers are. If there's one thing I've learned from my time at Microsoft is you cannot expect the developers to come to you. You have to go to where they are. What does this mean? It means giving them the support in the languages they know. Java, C#, Python, Go, JavaScript. It means giving them support in the tools that they know and they love. It means giving them comparable, if not superior experience. Let me give you an example. Up until a year and a half ago, debugging smart contracts was a nightmare. How do you expect mainstream developers to be able to jump in and be successful if we couldn't even give them a reasonable debugging experience? And these are the things that we set out to achieve here in Seattle for NEO, is to provide a first-class, friction-free developer experience to make sure each and every developer out there, the 21 million people out there, can jump in and feel comfortable, feel like they're building for a Microsoft toolset or an Amazon Web Services or a Google toolset. There should be no friction. There should be no sense of I'm now a blockchain developer or I'm now a X, Y, or Z. I'm a developer. And give me the tools in the languages and the support I've grown to like and to love and to enjoy. And that's exactly what we are doing here at NEO. We will take this to the mainstream. We will attract millions of developers, and we do this by going to where they are and serving their needs.
Got it. And I agree with you. And we were having a brief conversation earlier before we started this call, and I was telling you, like, our CTO I've known for a long time. I mean, he was telling me a year and a half ago, right? And I really respect his opinion. He said, Patrick, when I look at all these blockchains, every time I come to a platform and I say, okay, I want this tooling, I want this debugging, if I were to devise it from a development standpoint, they tend to have a lot of what I need. And he said there's some drawbacks. Maybe there wasn't as much documentation as you needed at the time or whatever, like you can expect with any growing platform. So I guess my next question is I believe that, and actually, by the way, I haven't done this yet. And like, I just messaging him, he might hop on, so he might get a special guest here. You'll like him. But what do you really think that, how is NEO solving those challenges? Do you think they have a competitive advantage? And if so, what needs to happen for the world to hear that?
Thank you. Fantastic question. So if you go to the roots of NEO, back to the origin when Hongfei Da and Eric Zhang built, designed and devised the architecture, NEO was built on a polyglot infrastructure. meaning it was designed from the very beginning to support a whole host of languages. And that gave us a very unique advantage out of the blocks in terms of setting up a platform play to attract, to motivate developers from across a variety of communities. Secondly, the fact that we actually based much of our plumbing on the Microsoft.NET infrastructure gave us a very unique role to play in the market because we can piggyback on the millions of developers who use .NET, let me give you, for example, a data point. On the average, every month, Patrick, there's about 6 or 7 million developers that use VS Code as the developer tooling. And the fact that we have built Neo, our toolkit, as a collection of extensions on VS Code. They are widely available on the VS Code marketplace, by the way. Again, gives us a very unique vantage point to drive awareness and to serve and support these developers worldwide. So I certainly strongly believe that by piggybacking, by attaching, and by providing a comparable, familiar experience, we certainly have a unique role to play in the blockchain industry and market.
Got it. So for the viewers that might not know, right, and I think fortunately, unfortunately, the crypto blockchain world has been divided in many ways, right? You have people that use it as an investment that in some ways they think they are technical analysts of projects now, right? I might check their resumes later and there might not be much there to back up that claim. So for maybe people that have certain conceptions about Neo or don't know anything about it, how would you describe Neo in a kind of really condensed version? Like why should Neo exist? Why are you excited about it? Why are you not on another team? Why, what is Neo?
So Neo is a platform for the new economy, what we call the smart economy. Now, what does it mean? It means that we are designing, architecting, and delivering a platform for digital assets, uniquely focused on digital assets. Now, this could mean all the way from, for example, gaming. Gaming is about digital assets to real world. Think about property, think about condominiums, apartments, homes, automobiles. So because of this singular focus, we're able to design a developer experience that far exceeds the vanilla blockchain platforms out there. For me, fundamentally, this new economy, what we call the smart economy, is about assets, is about a new set of assets, fully digitized, fully digital. Second, in terms of the developer play, Patrick, the key is this: the chain is just the chain. It is going to be the developer tools. And like you said, plays like EcoBoost to incent, to motivate, to fund and serve the developers that will create and build the ecosystem. It's going to be the ecosystem that determines whether a chain, how successful a chain is in terms of the future. So between the singular focus on the smart economy and the almost maniacal obsession we have with respect to developers, I strongly believe that we are in a very unique position to be very strong in the coming months and certainly years as we launch Neo 3 and more.
Got it. And I think one, not unique, but maybe have to take into account, Neo is obviously a project based in China, right? How do you think that affects your team? You're sitting there in Seattle, what is your outside take from like openness or government regulation or acceptance, from East-West mentality? How are from your perspective, how are different countries or regulators or sandboxes really treating crypto or blockchain? Is that a benefit for Neo or not? And do you guys use that to your advantage, et cetera?
Yeah, so first off, I would say, much of the distinctions, I think, are less and less relevant in this new world we live in. So second, yes, the founding team, the founding members were in Shanghai. At this point, the foundation is based in Singapore. Our co-developers span the globe. We have dev teams in Asia, in Latin America, in North America, US, obviously here in Seattle, Western Europe, Spain, Switzerland, the UK, Russia, and more in terms of South Asia. So I would say the core team, the developers, and certainly the communities that drive, that create the Neo platform and ecosystem, it's a global team and a global community. And lastly, in terms of perceptions, my sense is that in this world of digital, this is a first-class digital experience. We do not, and we certainly do not expect to carry any legacy forward. So in that sense, the adoption, the interest, the market momentum, certainly I do not see any perception of north, south, east, west. It's very much a blockchain platform for the smart economy. Developers that appreciate the tooling and the experience flock there, and devs building for other patterns or other use cases might choose to go to different chains. That's kind of how I see it.
Got it. All right, for the Reimagine 2020 audience, for the thousands of students watching and everyone, and we haven't done this yet, but I like John from the first time I talked with him. So we had a good conversation. And as I mentioned earlier, like one of our CTOs, like one of the projects, he told me maybe a year or 2 years ago, he was like, I really like this Neo project. They're like anything I would need from a developer perspective. One of my best friends, I just had to get him on. We're gonna do a 5-minute, just get him in and out. I haven't even seen him since he's been in quarantine like a month. And now all of a sudden he has a beard. I've never seen this in 10 years. We got Galen Danziger. Galen, are you there?
Oh, yeah, I am. Yeah, I've been rocking the quarantine beard a little bit.
Love it. So, hey, I know you're busy. Galen barely just woke up. He's in San Francisco. He was working all night last night. But Galen, I just want to get you on here. Obviously, you and I had talked before, and I think you had, a specific affinity for Neo. And maybe just introduce yourself quickly. And would just like, if you have a few questions for John, I think you guys might have a very interesting conversation.
Oh, yeah. So I've been, my name is Galen. I've been doing a lot of engineering at Mousebelt, I guess since its inception. We've been doing a lot of smart contract development, blockchain development, a little bit of anything and everything in the space, helping build out companies. And we've worked on a lot of different blockchains. Neo is definitely one that I think has been a pretty cool experience to work on, with like writing in multiple languages in it, compiling down with like MSIL, with it's just got a lot of things that I would look for. But one thing I noticed is I never saw it catch on. Like, even though I had a better experience writing smart contracts in Neo, the majority of smart contracts I see written are in Solidity. And I was just wondering, do you think, what do you think are the reasons that Solidity is just permeated throughout everywhere?
Look, first off, man, look, Neo's cool. I like it. I like the fact that you've been playing with it. I like the fact that you've been building and debugging and testing, that you've gone down to the MSIL level. Looks like we're in the same time zone. I'm up in Seattle, you're in San Francisco. And I like that we are innovating in this show by bringing on and extending. So absolutely, look, good. Thanks again. Thanks. I appreciate the feedback, and certainly the fact that you played with the tools. We are doing more. You spoke about, for example, debugging. About 18 months ago, debugging was a nightmare across the industry. We have done some pretty amazing things here in Seattle and Shanghai and Singapore to greatly decrease friction, to make it. In fact, next week, Galen, I'm going to be announcing what we call time travel debugging, being able to step forward and step back.
Oh, that's cool. That's very cool.
There you go. See, exactly. So being able to, because again, much of the challenges we see out in the market, like for example, the smart contract re-entrancy, logic errors, obviously, but being able to provide a superior debugging experience, we believe is paramount, right? So you're gonna, if you like debugging, you're gonna love the time travel debugging experience we will ship next week. Being able to step back, step forward, and being able to analyze, right? So back to your question. So here is how I see it. This game is very early, Galen. I spent about 18 years at Microsoft building V1 and V2 of the .NET platform. I led architecture early on for many years. There are about 21 million developers worldwide. At this point, and if you say, okay, so how many devs are there that are dabbling in the blockchain space? Your guess is as good as mine. And if we say, how many developers working, for example, on smart contracts using Solidity? Probably what, for 50,000, maybe 100,000? So it's way too early to declare victory, success, or otherwise, right? My sense is that thus far, the industry has been somewhat elitist. It's almost like you have to have the high priests come in and they know Solidity and they have to bless the contract before you deploy it, right? That was good. That was well and good for the early phase, the early wave. But if we are going to be successful, we have to go mainstream. Going mainstream means going to where the developers are. And this is the bet that we are making. So how do we drive more awareness? For us, it's very simple, Galen. Up here in Seattle, we are betting very big on the .NET and the Microsoft developer ecosystem. Just to give you another data point, every month, on the average, about 7 million developers use VS Code. And that's why we have designed the Neo Toolkit as a collection of extensions for VS Code, because we want to serve those developers. Even if we get 10% of that 7 million, that's about 4 or 5 times the number of devs building on Ethereum right now. It's a long journey. It's very early in the game. I want to get the 21 million developers to be able to write smart contracts using the language of their choice and not have to spend hours, days, and weeks, learning something new, climbing up this stairs, figuring out how does this thing work. I want this to be as simple, as friction-free as building and deploying a Lambda function on Amazon Web Services or an Azure function on Microsoft Azure. And that's where we are. With the time travel debugging next week, Galen, we're going to raise the bar on this, man. I mean, devs are going to love this thing. So
yeah, that sounds cool. I'll be trying it out as soon as it's announced. So
I love it.
I'll be following your Twitter.
I love it. Thank you.
All right, Galen, I know you only have another few minutes here. Galen's about to hop. Who's your next call with, Galen?
Hashgraph.
All right. So, what's your next one? Give us one more or two if you got the time.
So, one thing that I see really interesting with Neo is it looks like the Neo Foundation itself isn't driving all the goals of its development. I see City of Zion, which is having a pretty big impact, working on a lot of core aspects of Neo tooling. And I compare this to other blockchains where I see they're building everything out, sort of just deciding on the direction to go themselves. And with Neo, I see it seems like a collaborative effort. Do I have the right idea here? And if so, how does that influence development decisions and where the product goes?
So fantastic question, Galen. Absolutely. So from the very beginning, for us, our vision has been a global team, led by our community. So COZ is one of many. We have communities across Asia, South Asia, Latin America, here in the US, Western Europe, Spain, UK, Switzerland, Russia. So our sense is that, to live the principles of decentralization, the foundation has to support and enable and fund. However, the innovation, the flowering has to come from the edge across the communities. You are right, early on, COZ was one of the most vocal and perhaps active communities. However, at this point, we have groups across the world. For example, in St. Petersburg, NSPCC, investing heavily in Go and NeoFS. We have teams in Brazil, Neo Research, that are pushing the envelope in terms of DBFT and pioneering new research. Here in Seattle, NGD Seattle, in terms of debugging, I spoke about the time travel debugger, the Neo Toolkit, VS Code. So absolutely, we are committed. And we certainly, I would like to say we are living the principle of innovation at the edge. Fund, support, foster, but let innovation happen at the edge. Because if we believe a team in Singapore from the foundation can dictate top down, then something's not right with,
Yeah, absolutely.
with the founding vision and the basis, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that totally makes sense. Do you think that there are ever drawbacks to that approach? Do you have to discuss features for longer? Or you find that you're just getting new ideas more when you see this innovation from the edge approach?
So we see a lot more ideas than we can actually go work on. That's the fun part of it. There's so much. I mean, the backlog is tremendous, right? The challenge is obviously focusing and delivering quickly and rapidly to get feedback. So more ideas and certainly more innovation than we can probably push out, or what we would like to push out, in the short term. Yes, there is clearly more discussion, but I think discussion is about innovation at the edge. It's about debate, right? It's about making sure the community at large is able to drive the vision, and not have a team or a foundation or somebody, in Singapore or elsewhere saying, guys, this is what's going to happen. The vision is very clear. It's about digitizing assets. The focus is on 21 million developers worldwide. Now, how we get there piece by piece comes from Brazil, from Russia, from Singapore, from the UK, from Seattle, from Spain, and so on.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. And then I think one last question for you. You talk about educating 21 million developers. One thing I find is coding around a blockchain can be a little bit opinionated, a little bit different from some standard coding practices. How do you get people up to speed and make new developers feel pretty natural coding on a blockchain?
Again, a fantastic question, Galen. So I'm doing exactly what we did at Microsoft, which is provide templates, provide patterns, design patterns, and the tooling to realize these templates and design patterns. This always gives new developers a jump start. And this way, you don't have to be in the weeds figuring out the innards of every bolt and every nut out there. We say, look, these are the most common design patterns. These are the supporting templates for you. And if you want to just get going and build, test and deploy, something in about 5 minutes, you can do it on the Neo toolkit. And I love it, right? That's the way it should be. Because once you get the excitement, once you feel the power of the toolkit and the tools, then of course you can go in and you can spend your nights and weekends. But that first few steps, the key is the templates, the wizards, and being able to make those recurring design patterns very quickly and very easily realizable. And that's my focus here in Seattle.
So real quick, and I know you have to run, Galen, and whenever you need to jump off, feel free. But as long as we can keep you, see you guys. If everybody watching, I just shut up. I just let the smart people talk, right? But I think you guys are both talking about how to build these tools, how to make it easy to build blockchain, and I think we have another, say 5-7 minutes here on this call. But when we think about the students, right, and again, there's going to be a lot of universities watching this, so. Questions for you, John, and Galen, if you want to add some insight. Obviously, from our perspective, from a technical side, you're kind of in the middle between a lot of the universities, so you kind of hear what a lot of the students are asking for on a regular basis. But, John, what would be your advice to a student today in college who's kind of looking at blockchain? How would you tell them to approach it? I don't know if I mentioned it earlier. One of the things that always makes me laugh is again, just the pessimism of people that have kind of been in the space. And then what I see when the university students, you get on a call with 30 kids and they're not mad that they lost money on an ICO 2 years ago, right? They're not questioning the benefits of blockchain. They're like, I'm going to build an application and that's going to be built on blockchain, right? And they're just ready to go. So, for the few thousand students watching this, what would your advice be? Like if you're in school today, how would you be thinking about this?
It is the greatest time to be alive and to be a developer, to be a student. Here is why, right? I've seen multiple waves of platforms, gentlemen. I've seen the mainframe, the PC, client server, SOA, the web, and the cloud. In history, there has never been an economic platform. Blockchain is the very first economic platform in history. What does it mean? What I mean is, in previous waves, it was all infrastructure. It was plumbing. You could build and re-platform applications. with a blockchain platform, because we have intrinsic crypto economic protocols, because we have incentives baked in, we have a unique stack in history. And so I would say, to anybody out there in school, if you're watching this, forget the ICOs, forget the crypto, forget the token, forget about all of that. That's noise for you. Focus on the fact that you are able to build and deploy apps on the very first economic platform in history. And think about the possibility. The possibilities are enormous. Being able to have incentives designed in, intrinsic baked in. This is a whole new world. Think about how you could change the world of digital assets forever. And that's where I would say focus on. Forget about the token, the noise, the crypto and all of that out there. It's good. That's not where I would put my energy and time on.
For all you students out there, I have a feeling you want to listen to John. I think John's got a lot of experience. You might be smart to listen to John. Galen, you talked to a lot of the college kids. So one last question. I want Galen to tell a quick story you might like, John. But Galen, dealing with a lot of the students, what do you see? Like, what are their pain points? If you were to give a recommendation to a company like Neo, how could they reach more college kids, more innovation at the university level for little to no resources? And what questions do you have for them there?
Well, I would say for a company for any blockchain, they have to have, I would say, definitely good tooling, good easy ways to build an application. Like if a student is building something and they have to spend 2 weeks learning a platform versus 2 hours learning a platform, they're always going to pick the one that they spend 2 hours learning. It's just, especially if they're at a hackathon, it's a lot easier. So I would say always making things easy to understand and use is good. But outside of that, I think just being, getting in front of students where you can just have good community discussion areas or even presentations, just something to get out in front of students and help them learn, help them understand will really help Neo or any blockchain to get students to write apps on it.
All right, John, before we let Galen go and before I say goodbye to you, I have a good story. I forgot. I was reminded once Galen joined about the high priest. Galen, tell John how you first learned about Ethereum or the concept of Turing complete languages.
Oh, so it was I think 2014, early 2014. Vitalik had stayed at my place in San Francisco back when he was writing for Bitcoin Magazine and trying to raise money for Ethereum. And none of us really knew what a blockchain, well, some of them knew Bitcoin, some of them knew a little bit, but then he was just, he was staying with us and downstairs, he would just be giving all these lectures and talks and this is why we need a Turing complete language on a blockchain. And people might say well, what's a blockchain? And then a lot of people, my roommates in that time, just all caught the bug and got into it.
Very good. That's a very good story. Absolutely. I mean, look, we're on this journey. This is probably at best the first innings, gentlemen. You know this as well as I do. The best is yet to come. What a time to be alive, and especially for folks out there, in colleges and schools. I mean, there is no better time to build this digital future and to build this on the very first economic platform we've seen in history. It's just phenomenal. I mean, it's awesome, man.
Oh, absolutely.
No, and it's something that I think we see increasingly. We do a decent amount on the engineering side, corporate innovation, et cetera. And something that we've seen regularly and we've kind of come to the conclusion is getting very interesting. I think I've seen enough, even in our education alliance, right? We have Neo, Stellar, Ripple, Tron, NEM, right? So we talk to everybody, right? And so it's on one half kind of hear what the platforms or the people working in the space are saying. Another half kind of talking to the corporations. And I think we take a different approach in our conversations where we say, hey, we're not here to tell you we're the magicians of I'm going to write you the best supply chain application. We're going to help you kind of understand it a bit, right? And kind of dissect the components. And I see it where it's it's on one half, maybe early 2018 through 2019, a lot of the platforms wanted to prove themselves. They needed validation. They needed to prove their use cases. So they're trying to partner with enterprises, the companies that could provide them the volume or the validation at scale. So they kind of go down this path of pilots, right? Well, then if you look internally at these enterprise organizations, large institutions, they obviously have a lot of bureaucracy. So they say, okay, a lot of these pilots failed. So they say, okay, why did they fail? Well, okay, maybe in some cases, there's only one internal evangelist at X company, right? So if that person leaves the motivation. Or maybe there's a consortium and maybe one company came late to the consortium, right? And their interests were less accounted for than the earlier members, right? So kind of see this multitude of reasons why maybe pilots have or have not been successful, or why institutions look at it and say, we've tried 5 blockchain pilots, only one was, bearing fruit, or 3 didn't go live. So we've really been spending time looking at deconstructing why, right? Like before we talk about the
why.
Yeah, go ahead.
So look, I spent 25 years in the enterprise space, gentlemen. I know the enterprise inside out. There is a fundamental fatal flaw in how enterprises approach blockchain. They see it as one more plumbing platform. They see it as infrastructure. And so they are re-platforming applications. Because of their DNA, they are unable to understand the crypto economic protocols baked in. So what does this mean in practical terms? Almost every enterprise scenario does not take economic incentives into consideration. Look at any enterprise pilot or POC. I would say 9 out of 10, even more, they see it as infrastructure, possibly decentralized infrastructure. Enterprise IT cannot come to terms with incentives. And so failing this, any app that's going to be designed is going to be very difficult to show incremental value. And this is the fatal flaw with respect to how they think economic protocols means crypto or token. It's going to take some time for them to get past that and say, actually, I could exploit crypto economic protocols because they enable me to embed incentives and create governance. But IT is not there. And this, for me, is the fatal flaw I see.
There's so much I want to say. We literally don't have time. Galen, you could probably do this call for another hour.
I wish. I actually got to hop off. I got to join on this other one now.
I'm saying you probably could if you had the time.
Oh, absolutely.
We'll do another
John,
time.
It was no. We by the way, to everybody listening, we have some additional panels that we're scheduling next week, etc. And John, I think a few ideas came to this mind with a few big companies that I think maybe we'd ask you to join, and we'll have that conversation one off. But it was very nice meeting you, Galen. Do you see why I invited you to this call?
Oh yeah, it's cool. It's very cool.
So thanks for letting us play an audible, John. But again, for everybody listening, for all the students, for all the blockchain patrons. Listen to what John's saying. This is not, I think everybody looks at blockchain sometime as the shortest solution or what's the quick buck. This technology is not easy to build, right? And for the developers actually building it, we need tools. The same way you build a house, you need the right tools, right? And this is how people, whether you know it or not, whether you're an engineer, whether you're a speculator, whether you're just looking to buy your first Bitcoin, whether you're a student in the CS or data departments who wants to explore, there's some realities to this market, right? And building this future is not going to be easy. And it shouldn't be easy, right? By definition, if we want something good, we have to put into the work, right? And listen to people like John and hear what they're working on and these small changes that say, oh, there's a new update. We say, man, that took us 6 months to build. Like we need a little more recognition for that. But hey, John, before we go, any last words for the audience?
Oh yeah, so again, look, gentlemen, thank you for giving me the time and the opportunity. It is my privilege to be here, to be part of Reimagine 2020. And again, I want to echo what I said earlier. This is the very first economic platform in history. It's a very unique time to understand, to learn, and to exploit the power and the potential. We haven't seen anything yet in this space. And just so keep an eye on the industry, and certainly keep an eye on the tooling that we are building for developers. So thank you again.
It was a pleasure, man. You have a great energy, and I can't wait to talk to you again. For everybody listening, it's Patrick McLain again. We have Galen Danziger. We have John Davos. I'm going to destroy that. He's going to hate me. He said it didn't matter earlier. But for everybody listening, definitely appreciate it. Read about John online. Check out Neo. Go access their developer tools. Sounds like there's some new announcements coming out. And we're going to continue with a bunch of good interviews. And we appreciate everybody tuning in.
You're tuned in to Reimagine 2020. Stay tuned to learn more about the state-of-the-art in blockchain education and technological development all around the world. Reimagine 2020.